Hey biology folks, this is your first flipped video of the year. Um, this is what I need you to watch this weekend. So we're going to use this information um, on Monday when you come back into class. So a good place to start in any science class, particularly biology, is kind of talking about what science is. So let's take a look at some learning targets. So we're going to have one long-term learning target, and it says I can develop a model to determine if something is alive. And we're going to talk more about models in class. We're going to work with some models, and then eventually we're going to get you to make some models. So to support that big target, we got 3 supporting targets. I can define life in biology. I can list the 7 characteristics of life, of living things, and I can explain each of the 7 characteristics of living things. So some pretty simple learning targets for our first unit. So we ask ourselves, what is biology? Um, it's easy to define, but when you try to define what living things are, it gets a little more complex, which you're going to see just in a minute. With biology, it's basically the study of life. You know, if you break down the word biology, bio means living or life, and logy means to study. So if you take a look at this word art down here, you'll see a bunch of words that you'll sometimes come across in any regular biology class. Okay, you can pause that and look at it if you want to. So what is life? Can it be simply defined? Not really. It can be defined, not so much simple. To try to figure out what life really means, you have to look at some characteristics of life or things that are alive. Okay, and those characteristics really have differences. You know, there's different sets of them. If we use the textbook that we have at Belfry right now, there are probably 8 listed in that textbook, 8 characteristics of living things. I've seen as few as 5, and 6 is kind of common, but we're going to go with 7 for this class this year. So these are 7 characteristics that all living things, no matter how different they are, no matter how diverse they are, there are 7 things that all living things have in common. And to be considered a living thing, a life form, an organism, they must exhibit all 7 of these. You can't exhibit just 6 or 5 or just 1. It's got to be all 7. So let's take a look at them. So if you want to talk about the meat of this small unit, this first unit we're looking at, it's these next 3 slides that are the meat, the 7 characteristics. And we're going to use these 7 characteristics as a branching off point to deal with most of the rest of the year of biology. For example, number 1, all living things are composed of at least 1 cell. So later on, we're going to study, what cells are, and what are the parts of the cell, and the different kinds of cells, and the way to classify cells, and then some of the different functions that cells do. So, if all living things have at least 1 cell, that kind of gives you a hint that there are things called unicellular creatures, 1-cell creatures, and there's multi-cell creatures. You and I are multi-celled. Some people estimate that the average size human have about 25 trillion cells. That's just a very rough estimate, but just to give you an idea of the magnitude, trillions, not millions, not billions, trillions of cells. All living things can reproduce. Excuse me. It doesn't mean that every living member of every species will reproduce. As you know, there's humans that never have children. But as a general rule, the species will reproduce and make more of itself if everything's going right. There's 2 types of reproduction. There is sexual reproduction and there is asexual reproduction. And sexual reproduction probably doesn't mean what you might be thinking it means. It really just means some sort of process that gets a sperm cell and an egg cell together. These are 2 specialized cells that lots of organisms produce, not just animals. lots of organisms produce, and it combines the genetics of the male and the female of that different species. All right. Number 3, all living things require energy. First, they have to gather the materials, and organisms do this differently. Plants take in sunlight. A lion hunts. A mushroom kind of saps the nutrients from whatever it's attached to, rotting wood or a leaf litter on the forest floor. So they have to gather the materials, and then they have to find some way to convert them or make them usable for energy. And there's, just in this number 3 alone, there's 2 chapters, 2 classic biology units that we'll be talking about photosynthesis and something called cellular respiration. Number 4, all living things have a genetic code, which means they have most likely DNA, but some very simple life forms have only RNA, but the complex ones have DNA and RNA. You and I have DNA and RNA. We have 3 kinds of RNA, and it's something that really just can't be said in a few words. What DNA does for us. It is a molecule. It's a really, really, really long molecule, and it's kind of complex, and it does control everything in our lives, and it is that molecule that is passed on from parent to offspring. So we have genetics. Living things have genetics. Number 5, all living things respond to stimuli. Stimuli is plural. Stimulus is singular, and you can think of a stimulus as something that causes a reaction. Okay, if the doctor is testing your reflexes and takes that little rubber hammer and taps the tendon right below your kneecap, trying to see if you have a complete nervous system nerve loop from your knee to your spinal cord back to your knee, then if your leg moves, then you have a response to a stimuli. Sometimes you have this response that if there's a flight or a fright, a flight or a fight mechanism. If a wild animal is startled, it's either going to make a really quick decision to run away, that's the flight, or it's going to make a decision to fight, and that's a response to a stimulus. Every living organism in the wild must respond, or else they'll die. They'll usually be eaten. They'll become food. Number 6, all living things evolve. This is evolution. Evolution is really the basis behind biology. Most people consider it the background behind just about everything that's studied in biology. We'll get into evolution, much later in the class. All living things exhibit homeostasis. This is going to be better left for us to discuss in class. But if you want a quick example, body temperature and blood sugar levels. So I want you to think about this question, and we'll talk about it in class. Let's take a typical snow day in January. You're home from school, and your mom asks you to go out and get the mail. It's 10 degrees outside. You're running around the house in your shorts and t-shirt because it's warm in your house. You put on some shoes real fast, and you walk out to the mailbox and back, and it takes about 3 or 4 minutes. Remember, it's 10 degrees. If you put a thermometer in your mouth and measured your temperature the whole trip out there and back, your body temperature would stay approximately 98.6 the whole way. So why is it that it's 10 degrees outside, but you can maintain a body temperature of 98.6 for those few minutes? I want you to think about that. Blood sugar levels. If you're not diabetic, you usually don't have a problem maintaining blood sugar levels, even if you eat lots of sugar. However, if you are diabetic, you've lost that mechanism of homeostasis, and you can no longer maintain an even blood sugar level, and your blood sugar level goes up, which is why diabetics need to take insulin. Life is organized, very organized, okay? It's complex. Doesn't mean it's difficult to really understand. It just means it's composed of lots of parts. And when we say it's organized from either big to small, however you want to look at it. In bullet number 2, you see the word biosphere, and that's any part of the earth that can support living things, from the deepest oceans to the deepest caves and to the highest part of the atmosphere. that can actually support life. All that area is considered the biosphere, or the living sphere of the Earth. And you work your way down through terms that we'll get to eventually, like communities and populations, down to single organism, and then parts of organisms like organs, and then tissues and cells. And then finally we get down to this, like in the third bullet here, we talk about things like molecules, and then finally atoms. And even though molecules and atoms aren't alive by themselves, they do make up all matter, including living matter. So we are composed of billions and billions of atoms. So atoms and molecules are kind of the place we usually start with when we talk about how life is organized. All right, and that's it. You can pause, you can stop it here at this point. This video, I try to make them quick, so it doesn't take up a lot of your time. However, you'll probably need to go back and watch this if you didn't pause along the way to copy down each slide. The amount of material that I put on this video is not a lot, but you will need to have a record of each one of these slides. Remember, taking a screenshot on your phone is okay, but it's not the recommended best choice. It would do you a lot of good to really write this down. Okay, that's it. See you in class. Have a good weekend.